Hey everyone, my name is George Couros, and I'm really excited to join you as your keynote for the Arts Integration Conference. I'm going to share some ideas and thoughts with you on education, but I don't want this just to simply be me talking to you, but there's a wonderful opportunity for us to talk to each other and turn this into a conversation. So please connect with me through the hashtag Connectivity17, and you can also connect with me through my Twitter handle at @gcouros. And so let's talk about some of the ideas that I shared today, and I would love your thoughts, and maybe we can start a discussion. And I see a lot of connections towards the notion of arts and innovation and education, but I'm going to start off with a little bit of a story first. I was actually in the state of Virginia and I was new to the area and I had to speak at a conference, so I decided I was going to get an Uber. So I walked off the plane and popped out my phone and connected with an Uber, and somebody picked me up about 5 minutes later and they took me to the hotel, and I kept telling them the directions. They didn't seem to respond to me. I wasn't sure why. And then all of a sudden, the gentleman that was driving the car actually held up a sign and it said that I'm deaf. So I felt horrible because I had no idea. But obviously, because the map of to where we're going was actually directly inputted into the Uber, he knew exactly where to go. And he dropped me off at the hotel. And I had this really weird feeling because I felt that I could have done more to connect with him where he was at, as opposed to, just kind of being frozen there when I realized he couldn't actually hear what I was saying. But I kind of lost my opportunity. Next day came along and I started speaking at the conference. And I was done at the end of the day and I had to get back to the airport. And then I actually connected with an Uber again. And lo and behold, it was actually the exact same person driving the car. I knew him as soon as I walked out the door. As soon as he picked me up, we knew each other. We waved to each other and smiled at one another. And I knew he knew exactly where I was going to go. While I was in the car, waiting to get to the airport, I decided that I would actually learn to sign the word thank you at the end of the time. And so I'm sitting in the car and I Google how to make the word thank you in sign language. So I practiced a little bit, and the ride was actually really short. And then we got to the airport and he ran out of the car as one of the best Uber drivers I've ever had. And just the courtesy and the kindness and how polite he was. He got out of the car, he grabbed my bags, he put them on the curb where I was being dropped off. And as soon as we got out of the car, I went to him and I said, thank you. He started tearing up. I started bawling. It was an amazing experience. And it was just amazing to actually see how connected I could be to this person. And I had the opportunity to actually learn something very quickly. And I want you to think about all of the things that I just told in that story that didn't even exist 10 to 15 years ago. First of all, the ability to actually, connect and get a car through Uber. And I saw something on the internet. It was actually quite funny. It said, 10 years ago, we told people never to actually meet, people off the internet, don't meet strangers. And now in 2016, we're using the internet to summon strangers to get into their car. And I thought that was really funny. But the other thing too is that I was able to actually Google the information. I was to go onto YouTube, watch how to do the sign language. And I think about all of these tools that we actually have access to in our world today that we didn't even have 10 years ago. As I was doing my research, thinking about, what does art have to do with educators and what does that mean, I came across this quote by John Steinbeck, and it says the following: I have come to believe that a great teacher is a great artist, and that there are few as there are any other great artists. Teaching might even be the greatest of the arts, since the medium is the human mind and spirit. So if you actually put that into context, if you truly think that teaching is an art and the medium is the human mind and spirit, you have to also recognize the materials that we have to paint or sculpt a child's mind right now. They're absolutely amazing. We have access to things that we didn't have before. And what does this actually mean to education? And what does this mean to the work that we do every single day with our students? In my book, The Innovator's Mindset, I wrote about Carol Dweck's work, and she talks about the notion of fixed and growth mindset. When she talked about these two mindsets, thinking about them in the context of this talk or what you're seeing right now or what you're thinking, she talks about the idea of the fixed mindset. And this is the belief that abilities, intelligence, and talents are fixed traits and you can't actually grow over time. Now, reading something, recently by Carol Dweck, she's not saying you either have a fixed or a growth mindset, but you have fixed and growth mindsets and different things. So One of the examples I always talk about is I have a very fixed mindset when it comes to skydiving. I have no interest in learning skydiving, but when it comes to learning, how are we open to conversations? The growth mindset is the focus that the belief that abilities, intelligence can be developed over time. And I think this is very crucial. That reminds me of this quote by Dylan William. And what he says is that if we create a culture where every teacher believes they need to improve, not because they are not good enough, but because they can be even better, there is no limit to what we can achieve. And having this growth mindset is actually crucial to education. But one of the things that I would actually challenge is that it's actually not enough anymore. That's why I developed the notion of the innovator's mindset. And it's actually a next level of these two mindsets. And so the innovator's mindset is defined as the belief that abilities, intelligence, and talents are developed so they lead to the creation of new and better ideas. It's not simply knowing, it's doing something with what you know. If you think about these three mindsets in the context of playing the piano, I think this is a great analogy for this. The fixed mindset, you would believe that there's no way that you could actually ever learn to play the piano. The growth mindset, you would understand with hard work, time, effort, those talents could actually be developed and you could learn to play. The innovator's mindset would actually say, not only will I learn to play, I will compose and create music. I will actually do something with what I know. And I think this is where we have to understand there is a true artistry to the way that we teach and as well as the way we learn. Now let me talk to you about something that we've been talking about in education for quite a while. The idea of how do we keep our kids engaged. And I think this is a very important conversation to actually have. If you truly wanted kids to be engaged all day in school, you could actually probably play YouTube now and just play it all day and kids would be fine and they would actually be engaged and they could learn a ton. But I actually think that in a world where information is abundant, where you have access to all of this different information in the world, engagement is not a high enough bar. We have to look at how do we empower our kids? How do we empower our learners? How do we actually empower our staff? And how do they take ownership over what they learn? Now, people will challenge me, well, is engagement still important? And I say, absolutely yes. But if you truly think about it, you could actually have a student who is totally engaged, but they're not empowered. But if you're empowered, you're absolutely engaged. We have to understand that it's where we're aiming for continuously. How do we empower? How do we give ownership over that learning, which actually helps kids develop way past their time in education? So what I would like to do now is actually explore 5 key areas that I see that are extremely helpful in moving towards this notion of innovation where we get kids to create. How do we actually develop the artistry of educators? So I'll start with the first one. The first one is the notion of powerful learning first and technology second. You will often get people saying things like, well, you don't need technology to learn. Technically, that's true, but there's many ways that we can learn without what we perceive as technology. What opportunities does it provide to kids that didn't exist before? Just spending Christmas at home with my family and my brother and his kids. His daughter Rain actually just got a drum set, and it was Christmas Day. It was kind of interesting because she didn't actually know how to play, but she does have a drum set, and being about 13 years old, what does she do immediately? She goes onto YouTube and she starts playing. She starts learning different songs. She starts creating. She learns a ton of songs playing the piano using YouTube as well. And I think about this is not an opportunity that didn't exist when I was a kid, but it does exist now. And many of our students, they actually look at, how we can connect with YouTube, how we can connect with the biggest library in the world, and they have access to this. If I was to give your students a 1-question survey and ask them the question, where do you learn best, school or YouTube? How many of them would actually choose YouTube? They see there's a disconnect between what school and learning looks like, and we have to tap into this. But we have to also understand, what are we trying to learn in school, and what does this actually mean, and how does technology fit into it? When we talk about the notion of powerful learning first and technology second, we have to be willing to explore what possibilities technology brings. Years ago, I got onto Twitter and I saw how powerful it was. Not the notion of Twitter, but the ability to actually connect with other educators and learn from them, having conversations that I never actually had before. And it was quite powerful to see this. Through my understanding and through my own development, I actually started to understand what learning could take place. And an example I have is that we were working with a grade 1 teacher. And during this teacher's time in her school, she used to do this journal with her students where they would actually document plant growth over time. And what we actually saw was there's an opportunity here to actually go a little bit further and try something simple as Instagram. So we got onto Instagram, and you could actually see the students would take an iPad or an iPod Touch that had Instagram logged on, and they would actually document the plant growth of the plant over time. Instead of simply writing it in the journal and having the teacher see it and write something back, these kids were now sharing their information to the world. And it wasn't just that they were building an audience, which was part of it. They were actually having an opportunity to connect with their parents, see the importance of digital citizenship. What does this actually look like? And not only did you see the plant growth over time, you see the community develop. You see the actual parents have different conversations at home. Instead of asking the question, what did you learn today? And getting the response, nothing. They are now actually saying, hey, I saw that you posted that picture of that plant. Tell me more about it. Tell me what you're seeing in class. And now we're actually using technology in a way to build a much more robust community with our parents and connect and share ideas in totally different ways. One of my favorite examples of someone taking this idea and remixing it and creating their own artistry out of it was Tracy Kroc. She's actually an educator just in Missouri. And what she started was a program with her schools called Digital Parent Volunteers. And what these teachers actually did was they would have their students blog, and then parents would actually be assigned to volunteer in the class that couldn't maybe physically be there to actually write comments to these students, and they would write every single day. So now these parents that could never physically be a part of their learning of their child could actually now be connected not only to their child but to other kids in the classroom, and they could comment at any point of the day. So taking something as simple as writing in a journal and actually posting it online and sharing, bringing parents in, teaching kids other skills, actually still meets the needs of the curriculum, but the technology allows us to do something so much more. And that goes back to this idea of how we actually see the tools that we have to help develop the canvas of the child's mind. The next is strengths-based leadership and learning, and I love this quote from Tom Rath. He says, when we build on our strengths and daily successes, instead of focusing on failures, we simply learn more. When you look at your students, your colleagues, those that you serve in education, are you looking at where they're weak or where they're being developed, where they are strong? Because when you start developing those strengths, the weaknesses actually get better over time. In 2005, Tom Rath actually did a survey to explore what it meant to focus on the strengths of the people that you serve. What they found was that when employers ignored their employees, that their chances of being actively disengaged were actually 40%. Now, when you focus on their weaknesses, their chances of being disengaged were actually 22%. But when they focused on strengths, the chance of being disengaged was actually 1%. This goes back to that notion of going past engagement and empowering people, looking at what they're strong at, how they have ownership over what they do. And you see this often. We will say things like, oh, we're data driven. But what that often means is we're weakness focused. We look at things that people are weak at and in our schools, and what we try to do is we try to fix everything. And you're playing a game of educational whack-a-mole. You'll see something is weak here and you'll try to fix it, and what you'll realize is something will actually pop up where it's actually weak somewhere else, and you'll try to fix that. We'll have meetings about kids talking about all the things that they struggle with, as opposed to focusing on what they're really good at. One of the things that I would suggest trying with your colleagues or with your students is simply asking them what they love, finding out what those passions are and trying to tap into them. Once you start understanding those things and developing them, they actually can really help not only build relationships, but develop those people. One of the ways that we actually developed and tapped into the strengths of the students and staff in our school is we had a thing called Identity Day. Students actually had a day to actually talk about things that they really loved, so they worked on it for a little while, but everyone in the school actually saw what other students loved and what they were passionate about, and actually bridged connections. You saw teachers having no idea who some students were, and then they actually felt that there was a common connection because they actually had very similar interests in what they loved. Not only was it an amazing day, it was also a great opportunity for our teachers to learn more about our students and learn more about what drove them, what they loved, and bring those things into the classrooms. We talk about innovation and artistry all the time in education, But think about it. If you're not passionate about something, how innovative are you going to really be? The next idea I'm going to focus on is the idea of less is more. If you think about your school district, and you think about the initiatives, can you name 3 or could you name 10? Could you name 50? This is why it's so important that we actually focus on a few things and try to do them very well. The trick here is actually trying to manage what you do in your classroom with, tons of curriculum, tons of initiatives, maybe even testing, and actually narrowing those things down to actually, focus on what's really, really important. This is why I focus on the idea of innovating inside of the box. We tell people you need to think outside of the box, but your reality is you work inside of a box. There's never going to be a year where you have a ton of money that you're going to have in education. There's never probably going to be a year where we're not testing kids, that we're not teaching curriculum. And I think that you have to look at what you are doing with inside of that box that you work in to actually bring these powerful learning experiences together for our students. When I was a principal, to embrace this knowledge of less is more, one of the key words that we use in the work that we do was create. How do we get students to actually create what they're learning? Not just to simply regurgitate information, but how do they actually create ideas? This will actually lead into the next point, creating meaningful learning experiences. If you think about your experience as an educator, what is powerful to you, what you love to do, how you love to learn, a lot of times we don't bring those experiences into our classrooms. I hear educators talk all the time how much they love ed camps and how amazing an experience it is, but I only hear on a very few occasions ed camps actually making their way into the class, into the schools. But a lot of times we also do things with our students for them that we don't do ourselves. If you see the makerspace craze taking over all over North America and way past that, you see that mostly for students, but you rarely see it for adults. Do we actually immerse ourselves in these same experiences we want for our kids and vice versa? One of the ways that I wanted to embrace that and to learn more about something that our students could do was with digital portfolios. We had talked years and years about digital portfolios, but we never actually seemed to do them. And I would actually challenge that. A lot of schools right now, even though they think they're doing them, I actually think they're doing them poorly, because you have a bunch of students learning something from teachers that have never learned it themselves. So I said, I have to learn this process myself and understand what is the true power of a digital portfolio. I don't want it just to become some type of digital dump. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I actually started my own portfolio, which is actually a blog/portfolio. It's separated into 2 areas, a learning portfolio and a showcase portfolio. And what's really powerful about this, it shows my growth over time, but it also has an opportunity to show my best stuff, what I want people to see right now, and it actually connects to things that I want to do, continuing on in my career. Even though I started it 6 years ago, I've maintained it this entire time. Every time I write a blog post, I actually organize it to what standards I meet, and it's still connected there. So you can see the 7 different standards I'm expected to meet in my role, how they're actually connected to in what we do in education. What was really powerful is that actually when I wrote my book, I could actually Google my own stuff and find it and actually put it in the book, that I actually created this library of all the work that I was doing over time. What I love about this is it actually shows you these snapshots in a very powerful way where you can watch these kids develop over time. And there's a beautiful example of an artist who did this who probably didn't actually have the thought of doing it in the first place. What's amazing about this artist is you can actually see his work from the age where he's 2 years old. But then you can also see where he's 3, where he's 4, and it actually goes all the way until he's 28 years old. You can actually see how powerful it is when you see the development and growth over time. But what's really amazing about this is that the final work when they're 28 is actually really, really good. But I don't know if I would say it's absolutely amazing. That would be up to, each person individually how they see it. But when you compare it to see where the person has grown over time, it is actually shows it's quite amazing, their development and growth, and how crucial this is in the work that we're doing. And what's beautiful about the way we show portfolios, it actually shows the person's willingness to develop over time in a way we actually could never have done with paper. Understanding it from an experience of actually doing this work myself, I could actually really help our students to grow in this area as well. The last area I'm going to focus is the notion of embracing an open culture. I want you to think about how much better we are now that we have access to TED Talks, some of the most brilliant people in the world in so many different areas, that we have access to their knowledge, to their learning. And this is actually started by a gentleman named Chris Anderson. In 2010, when Chris Anderson did his actual own TED Talk, he talked about the notion of crowd accelerated innovation, that the more connected we are, the better we are able to learn. He talked about 3 areas that were very crucial to this notion of crowd accelerated innovation. First one was that people who share a common interest. The bigger the crowd, the more people learn, as he said, and the more potential innovators they are. The next is that you have visibility to see what others are doing, that you have access to this. You look at how people dance compared to when I was a kid to now. There's so much better dancing out there because you have access to see this. You see more people interested in dancing and actually people doing moves at a much younger age because they have access to this all the time, no matter where they live. And then the last one he talked about was the idea of the desire to grow, change, and improve. And this is very crucial, is that it can't be just simply access to these ideas, it's what you do with them. But that crowd accelerated innovation provides us opportunities that didn't exist before. Social media, Twitter, they have become these spikes where people that are very passionate about what they do can actually learn from some of the best people in the world. The best person to make you an amazing second grade teacher is not me, it's actually other second grade teachers doing that work right now. And you have access to learn from these people, whether they're on the other side of the world or they're actually on the other side of your building. And this is not something that only educators should tap into. We should actually teach our students how to connect, how to learn, especially in a world where every single student that we work with is actually going to be Googled for a job or university. So how do we actually get these kids to focus on not simply digital citizenship, but digital leadership? The idea of actually using the social media, this opportunity, this world that they have at their fingertips to do something better with their world. Educator Rushton Hurley put this beautifully. He said, if students are sharing their work with the world, they want it to be good. If they're just sharing with you, they want it to be good enough. How do we actually get them to tap into and share their work with the entire world? I just wanted to give you some final thoughts into what I just talked about. I understand how hard teaching is and the little intricacies of our every single day, and we never know what every day is going to look like, and so it's much harder to do this. But when you see your work as an art, when you see it as crucial to what we do, because it not only evokes thought, it evokes emotion and brings something totally different. It is so powerful now to think about how we can really easily make schools so much better for our students, for ourselves as educators, because the canvas is the same, but the tools that we have access to are so much better. And this is something that we have to always think about in education. And so I wanted to wish you a wonderful school year. I really want to thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Just understand that what you do matters so much, and that you have to embrace the artistry that you do as an educator. Thank you for your time. I look forward to staying connected.